Foreign Secretary James Cleverly, welcome to In Conversation.
Thank you very much.
How is the UK going to restore investor confidence after this terrible fall in the pound?
Well, there's a long-standing convention that ministers don't discuss currency movements specifically for, we don't want to then do anything that might further influence markets. It's worth remembering, of course, that currencies across the world are down against the dollar, and so we're not unusual in that respect. But the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are going for a high growth strategy with a target of 2.5% growth for the UK, and that means reducing the tax burden on businesses and individuals. It's about encouraging investment. That's what we're aiming for. Some of these changes have triggered some market reactions. That is not completely surprising, but we have a consistent strategy to go for growth, to work with our international partners to get inward investment into the UK. That's part of the reason why I'm here in the region. But I have confidence that actually we will see over the medium to long term a real boost to the UK economy.
What would you say, though, to Southeast Asian investors who have been very disquieted, though, by what they've seen? Because obviously, people want to invest in places that are stable, in which they can rely on the currency being not losing value. So what do you say to Southeast Asian businesses who are now perhaps a little bit apprehensive?
Well, what I would say is remember all the reasons why you've been so confident about investing in the UK in the past. We've got stable institutions, a well-educated and highly motivated society, and we are a real innovation hub. And not just in London and the South East, which has been the traditional focal point for international investment, but right across the UK, in all of the component nations of the UK, and particularly in some of the regions like around Manchester and Birmingham and the North East, in Wales, and Scotland. We've shown some real innovation and some real fantastic opportunities for investors, not only to help us grow our economy, but also to give a good return for them as well. So what I would say is look at this longitudinally. The currency, the sterling against the pound exchange rate, as I say, matches what you would see in a lot of other currencies around the globe. But ultimately, Britain is a good investment opportunity for all the reasons that we've always been.
What about the problem of the fact that the UK is no longer part of the EU? Now, that's not going to change. And that, of course, means that the UK, which used to be sort of a stepping stone very often for many Southeast Asian countries into Europe, is no longer the case.
Well, whilst we're no longer a member of the European Union, we, of course, are still a European country. But we are a European country with very long-standing economic and cultural links to this region. I'm here in Singapore, where we enjoy a very, very long-standing and very close relationship. Of course, the UK continues to perform its traditional role, which is to be a powerhouse in its own right, but also to have good links into Europe, good links into North America. We're a very, very active member of the G7. And so the UK, as I say, is going to continue playing its role as a bridge to other economies in our neighbourhood, in our Euro-Atlantic neighbourhood, but also a very strong engine for growth in our own right.
But a Southeast Asian or an Asian business that sets up a factory in the UK will now no longer have all the benefits of being able to export with pretty much no tariffs into the EU. Now they'll have to export from the UK as if they were like any other country.
Well, we still have a very good trading relationship with the EU. And let's take a specific example. I've just a few days ago come back from Japan, where I marked our commiserations to the death of former Prime Minister Abe. Now, one of the companies, Japanese company in UK, doing very successfully is Nissan. Nissan are investing more in their plant in Sunderland. Why? Because it's one of their most productive plants in Europe. And so what I would say to the investors watching this programme is the UK is here to stay. We're a strong and reliable partner. We've demonstrated to those businesses who have invested into the UK that their investment is good and sound, and that will remain the case. So, you know, come on in, the water's fine.
Even with very, very high debt levels, because on the one hand, people say, looking at the enormous debts that the UK has, and with the increased spending and the unfunded tax cuts, that's a worrying development that's quite fundamental.
Well, I would remind people that the UK has got the second lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7. So our economic strength is still there. The headlines over the last few days, might cause a few people to have a few nerves, but the point I would say is look at what has made the UK a strong investment partner for decades. Ask yourself why Nissan not only have stayed in the UK, but are investing more in the UK. Ask yourself about the technology innovation that we're driving through, whether it's green energy generation, battery storage, small modular nuclear reactors. There are so many exciting things to go on, and we want the world to be part of it. We want this region to be part of it. That's why I'm here today.
The war in Ukraine has gone from being a European concern to really being a global concern. How long do you think this war in Ukraine is going to continue?
It's really difficult to say how long this will play out, but there are some really important principles at stake, and it is a conflict which is happening in Europe, but is having global ramifications. For us, this is about defending some really core international principles. That powerful countries cannot just invade their neighbours with impunity. That's something that's incredibly important. The breach of United Nations conventions is unacceptable, and we would be as passionate in defence of those principles in any other part of the world. We are seeing that Russia is using hunger as a weapon of war, and is plunging millions of people in the global south into hunger. And we need to address that. We need to unlock those grain exports from those Ukrainian ports. And ultimately, we will continue to support the people of Ukraine defending their territorial integrity and their sovereignty, because it really matters. And it matters here in Southeast Asia just as much as it matters in Eastern Europe.
For whatever period of time it takes, because it's now gone from people saying it's going to take weeks to now months, which is perhaps to the great credit of the Ukrainians, it might end up being years.
Well, I think, again, another message that we need to send right across the world is that we are patient when it comes to defending the principles that we think matter. And so there is no time limit on our support to Ukraine. There is no time limit on our passion for those international principles and norms that need to be defended.
think, though, that ordinary people who may not be so close to the Ukrainian conflict may end up running into a level of fatigue where they think, well, what I'm really concerned about is rising oil prices getting through winter, or rising food prices, which we're seeing here in Southeast Asia as well?
Well, it's absolutely right. People worry about their own families, their own lives, their own businesses perhaps. And it's right and proper that people are concerned about that. And we have to make sure that we address those issues at the same time as addressing some of these global issues about territorial integrity and sovereignty. That's why we worked so hard with our international partners to unlock those grain exports from those southern Ukrainian ports to make sure that people had food in their mouths. That's why we worked with our international partners in the hydrocarbon energy generation sector to try and address those rising oil prices and gas prices. And that's why we will continue to work with international partners like the members of ASEAN, for example, to make sure that we protect ourselves from future risks, to get that green energy generation so we can't be held hostage by Russian gas supplies again. But we have to do all these things all at the same time.
Southeast Asia is now the largest trading partner of China, and China is a very, very big part of what takes place here in Southeast Asia. Liz Truss, who's now Prime Minister and was formerly in your seat as Foreign Secretary, calls China a threat to national security. Do you agree? Is China a threat to national security?
Well, we have seen some behavior from China that we are deeply uncomfortable with. We have seen cyber activity that we don't think has been to the benefit of good relations with China. We see the Chinese attitude to some of the minorities within their own country, particularly the Uyghur in Xinjiang. And we have seen China not fulfill its obligations to the people of Hong Kong. So these are the reasons why Liz Truss said what she said, and those are the reasons why I'm still concerned about some of the behavior of China. But ultimately, we also recognize that China, through its economic growth, has lifted literally millions of people out of poverty. That is a positive thing. China has become an international trading partner, not just to the members of ASEAN, but to us in the UK and Europe as well. That is a good thing. But what we want to see is a future relationship with China where its activities are more in line with the international rules and norms that we subscribe to. That is good for China, that is good for its trading partners, and we want to see a future relationship with China where there is no question about the nature of the relationship, that the relationship should be a positive one, an economically beneficial one, and one based on the international rules and norms that we all subscribe to.
So what word would you prefer to use then? If I were to say, okay, let's look at UK-China relations, what word would you like associated with that?
Well, what I would ultimately like to see is a healthy partnership. We are not quite there yet. And the choice is for China. The offer is there, the offer is open. The international community has worked well together through multilateral fora, through these rules that we've all chosen to subscribe to, United Nations rules, World Trade Organization rules, and others. And I think if China were to also subscribe fully to the implementation of those rules, then it would be good for us, it would be good for China, it would take some of the tension out of this relationship, and it would mean that we wouldn't have to consider China as a threat. We could see China as an opportunity, China as a partner, but it would require China to change some of their behaviours.
So you're using the word healthy. You didn't say warm or friendly.
Well, I believe in competition, and I believe that actually you can have very healthy, mutually beneficial relationships, even if you disagree on some significant points and areas.
Final question. The defense pacts, AUKUS, that though is seen by some, also Southeast Asian countries, Indonesia and Malaysia, have already said that they're uncomfortable with that defense pact between the UK, the US and Australia, which they see as actually increasing tensions and possibly making China even more nervous than necessary. So what do you say to Jakarta and Kuala Lumpur to tell them that that's perhaps not true? Or is it actually true? It does raise tensions.
Well, you've got to remember that the UK has had very, very strong defence relationships with both the United States of America and Australia. And those relationships have gone on for centuries. The AUKUS agreement is about sharing modern technology with very close defence partners. And the nuclear technology is, of course, a civil nuclear technology. It's about propulsion, not about weapons, and it's about making sure that we stay very closely aligned with very, very long-standing trading and defence partners in Australia and the US. And what I would say to our good friends in the region is that actually we remain a good partner to this region, a good partner to them, as do Australia, as do the US, and there is no reason why any of our friends should be in any way concerned about what is a very natural extension of a very long-standing relationship between those three countries.
Is there, though, can it be said that there's a leaning more towards Washington, D.C. by London now? Because that can be perceived in that way from Southeast Asia.
Well, one of the reasons I am here visiting Japan, Korea, and now Singapore, and in fact, later on today, I will be making a speech where I set out in unambiguous terms the reason why we are so passionate about building on our already strong relationships with the region. Our Indo-Pacific tilt is something that's not just a narrative, it's not just words, it is actions, it's deeds, and it is intent. And we intend this relationship to be one of positivity amongst friends, to our mutual social and economic benefit, and we're here for the long term. So
you'll be visiting Jakarta and Kuala Lumpur soon?
I sincerely hope so. I have to say the tradition of hospitality in this region is being proven to be true, and I've had a very, very warm reception in all of the capital cities that I have visited, and there's a real appetite to build on the relationship. As I say, the good relationship that we've got, and the appetite exists not just here in the region, but also back in London as well.
James Cleverly, thank you very much for being on In Conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.